Still half asleep. All right, so we are going to pick up where we left off yesterday, and that is with the, all right, so this morning I was trying to figure out, like, which one of these subcommittee hearings Hunter Biden showed up at. And yesterday, if you joined me yesterday, we did the very first subcommittee hearing on Secretary Mayorkas, the impeachment inquiry for him. And so that actually happened simultaneously with this subcommittee hearing. All right, fine. So we ended up doing this one second. Then I had some internet issues. Today I'm coming to you from my extremely messy room and half-ready self in the Restream studio to see if this helps with the internet issue I'm having. I don't know what it is, so I'm not going to bore you with the details. Well, anyway, so this morning I'm trying to figure out, like, why in the world haven't we seen him in this subcommittee hearing? Turns out there was a third one yesterday. The House Oversight Committee. That's the one that he showed up at. So we're going to finish this one out first, and then after that, we're going to move on, do a separate live stream. I'm going to do all of these separately because they have all different thumbnails. I did redo the thumbnails for this one, part 1 and part 2. So without further delay, here we go.
That foreign nationals appear to have sought access and influence by engaging in lucrative business relationships with high-profile political figures, immediate family members, close quote. And it states that the committee seeks to craft legislative solutions to address this problem. My amendment provides further context for this discussion by highlighting recent reporting concerning former President Trump and the businesses controlled by his family during his presidency. Given the majority's interest in foreign nationals seeking access and influence through business relationships, I presume that they were alarmed to learn from recent reporting that properties owned by former President Donald Trump and controlled by his family during his presidency received at least $7.8 million in foreign payments from 20 countries during his tenure, including $5.5 million from the Chinese government and its state-controlled entities, as well as sizable payments from Saudi Arabia. The concern over foreign and domestic influence over the office of the president and other public officials is so critical an issue that the nation's founding fathers included bars to such entanglements in Articles 1 and 2 of the Constitution, known as the emoluments clauses. As the framers knew, even the appearance of corruption can lead to reasonable concerns that our democracy is for sale. Donald Trump has a long history of connecting his views of other nations to his financial remuneration, stating in 2015, for example, that he likes Saudi Arabia very much, since they buy apartments from him and spend in the tens of millions of dollars on these apartments. Recently, he's had warm words for China's leader, Xi Jinping, repeatedly calling him, quote, an exceptionally brilliant individual, close quote. Could it be because the Chinese government lined the pockets of his family business throughout his presidency? We don't know. But if the committee is truly interested in pursuing questions related to foreign influence of presidents by means of business relationships with family members, it would be a glaring hole to ignore the business relationships of the previous president and his family. My amendment would correct this deficiency. I ask that my colleagues support the amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Withdraw. The gentleman withdraws his objection. The gentleman from Florida is recognized to speak on the amendment.
I'm glad that the ranking member has ripened the question of bribes from China. I think it's one that I would like to explore with Hunter Biden if he were willing to properly acknowledge and honor the subpoena that he'd received from the United States Congress. And if there's any comparison on the Trump policies toward China and the Biden policies toward China, I am eager to engage in that comparison because President Trump put tariffs on China. He was tougher on China than any Republican or Democrat president in my lifetime for sure. And what I've learned about studying bribes is that when people pay them, they typically want something in return. And so when you've got these allegations about Trump in China, you're able to easily compare that to a record where Trump cracked down on China. Now let's compare that to the Biden record. After the Biden China bribes, you get the Biden administration dissolving the China initiative that President Trump and his administration set up at DOJ to specifically go after and prosecute Chinese efforts to engage in malign influence with academia, with politicians, with high society, and I know we have members of this committee intimately familiar with Chinese malign influence, and we would want a DOJ resilient and capable to be able to ensure that no one fell victim to that, from the United States Congress to even service on a city council. Now, Hunter Biden had this interesting email exchange on his laptop related to China that I can't wait to ask him about when a judge ultimately orders him here or to a jail cell. Why was Hunter Biden hosting the annual meeting for his investment fund at the home of the Chinese ambassador? Seems like an odd choice. There are a lot of great venues in Washington that could host the meeting for your annual investment fund, but when you choose to do it at the home of the Chinese ambassador, that seems to send a pretty clear message that it's hard to figure out where China ends and the Bidens begin. And I found it particularly interesting that while Hunter Biden was personally setting up this special and unique venue to convince people to invest in his fund based on his close ties with the Chinese, that all he had to do to secure the venue was agree to a private one-on-one meeting with the ambassador beforehand, which the emails indicate Hunter was readily willing to do. So aren't the rest of you curious to know what the ambassador wanted to meet with Hunter Biden about before Hunter Biden used his Chinese relationships to enrich himself, his family, his relatives, his uncle, his father, to pay the bills, to run the Biden crime family? I'd like to know what was going on at that meeting.
Would the gentleman yield?
Sure.
Let me just say, it may very well be that what Hunter Biden was doing was wholly improper. It may very well be that what Hunter Biden was doing was criminal. There is a special prosecutor. What there isn't is any evidence that President Biden had anything to do with any of this.
Well, I would suggest that the ambassador from China probably wasn't requesting a one-on-one meeting with Hunter Biden to go over investment tips and investment strategies. And if we had Hunter Biden in the witness chair, we could ask him. So it's one thing to say, well, there's just no evidence here. And then we want to ask simple questions, like, was the ambassador asking about Hunter Biden's art interests and whether he preferred oil paintings or watercolors? I'm guessing that's not the case. And the reason Hunter Biden doesn't want to be in that witness chair is because when confronted with the documents and the evidence, they are boxed in. Because everybody in this country knows what was going on. Hunter Biden was the bag man. He was collecting the money, and Joe Biden was the inside man. And he was delivering the results for China and anyone else that was willing to pay him off. And that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. He seeks recognition. Question to gentleman from California.
I won't take the full 5 minutes, but I just want to sort of answer once and for all the absurd allegations about the former president. Not since George Washington have we likely had as wealthy a president as we did in President Donald Trump give up his day-to-day life as President Trump did. He gave up and put into trust 400 different entities, gave up control of them for his entire presidency. And for the Democrats to point to the sales that occurred at the Trump Hotel is not only beyond the pale, but it happens to be so factually incorrect with our founding fathers. During George Washington's presidency, were his thousands of acres simply laid fallow? Of course not. He continued to produce both wheat and grain, but also, as many know, alcohol. And he sold it. And he sold it to whoever bought it. And the buyer could well have been our own government. That was not the intent. And certainly, if his wheat or grain were exported and bought by some entity outside the U.S., nobody was going to say, oh my gosh, George Washington is on the pay of a foreign government. That's not what that clause in the Constitution means, and everyone knows it. But what it does mean is, did you receive funds, directly or indirectly, that were not for proper goods and services? That is what we believe Hunter Biden did. He received clearly millions of dollars into shadow companies, and there is little or no, in many cases, little or no actual performance, and certainly no history prior to the vice president having that position where Hunter Biden could go around the world selling it. But again, I'm going to just close. I said I'd make it in less than 5 minutes. We are not even talking about that, except that the Democrats want to keep making this about Donald Trump. It's not about Donald Trump or his family. If we had a subpoena to Donald Trump today or to his family and they wouldn't come, then I would be supporting a contempt until they did come. We have a valid, an undeniable subpoena that has not only been denied, but as I've said on every previous time, the middle finger has been pointed at the American people, and that is what we are here for today. I look forward to the vote and the final vote, and I yield back.
Gentleman is back. Gentlelady from Pennsylvania.
I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized.
I just want to correct the record, and that appears in the report that I have already put. under unanimous consent into the record the Democrats' report about the pocketing of millions of dollars over the course of 2 years of President Trump's term. I will note that once the Republicans came into the majority, now Chairman Comer shut down any more information coming to us about the other failures and taking of emoluments against the Constitution. But let's get the facts straight. Immediately, and I'm quoting the report, immediately after the 2016 election, ethics experts from across the political spectrum, reading the writing on the wall, urged the new president-elect to fully divest himself of his business interests and place them all in a truly independent blind trust. We all lived that. Guess what? It never happened. Again, quoting the report, throwing caution to the wind and the Constitution to the curb, former President Trump bluntly and cavalierly rejected all such bipartisan advice. Here's what he did. He instead chose to place the day-to-day management of his businesses in the hands of his 2 adult sons while retaining personal ownership and control of all his businesses, as well as the ability to draw funds from them without any outside disclosure. End quote. That's page 7 for those who want to begin to read the report. I'm not impressed that the former president did not take what he was constitutionally allowed to take, which was the president's salary. I am not impressed, because if you go to the report and you take a look at what happened, information, page 10 of the report, information available to the committee shows that among countries patronizing Trump properties, China made the largest total payments to the president's private business interests. Let's see who it was. According to the subset of documents obtained from Mazars and additional documents from the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, these payments collectively included millions of dollars from China's embassy in the United States, the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, a Chinese state-owned enterprise, and Hainan Airline Holding Company, a subsidiary of Chinese company HNA Group, owned by the Hainan provincial government. And if you turn to page 14, the largest entry, there's a grid of all of the money that they were able to track by way of the financial documents. China's the top performer. Total spending through China to the entities identified, again, just 2 years and just partial documents, $5,572,548. Where were those dollars deposited, basically? Pocketed? Trump Tower, Trump International Hotel, Washington, D.C., Trump International Hotel, Las Vegas, $5.5 million taken in during the president's time when he failed to divest himself. I don't know about you, but once the president lost,
so let me
he
just
had to
get
leave
this
the White
straight.
House under.
So what they're saying is that during the course of his presidency, his hotels couldn't take in any revenue for 4 years, ? And on top of it, it's my understanding that before he was sworn in, his hotels and business were signed over to his 2 sons. That's insane. I also wanted to bring up the thing I just put up yesterday. Twiddly Pip, who's from the UK, she even wrote in the comment or the chat comments yesterday that Donald Trump, during the duration of his presidency, donated his entire salary to charity. Every quarter, he had a little press conference and would sign it over to the charity of his choice. I should actually find a list of that. He was required each quarter to take, I believe it was $1. So that's $16 for the course of his 4 years he took in as salary. These people have no shame. I'm also going to just put up again here. This is the second half of the House Judiciary Committee. Yesterday morning, held at the same time as the Mayorkas impeachment hearing, and apparently the same time as the House Oversight Committee about contempt of Congress oversight. Why in hell's bells they had all 3 of these going simultaneously in one day, I have no idea. So in order to just, try to keep everything together, yesterday I was having some internet issues, so we cut it off about halfway. I have relabeled the thumbnails part 1 and part 2, so hopefully it helps follow along. Once we're finished with this, I will conclude this live stream, and then I have another live stream already set up for the House Oversight Committee hearing on Hunter Biden contempt of Congress. That's the one that you've seen clips of for the last day, where he showed up and apparently stormed out midway through. There was a representative from Tennessee on News Nation last night. I forget his name, but he had said in his little, clip on News Nation, Hunter Biden is actually filming a documentary. And apparently him and other people had noticed that the black SUVs had shown up to the Capitol building. So they had even though they didn't know for sure, they had kind of suspected that he was going to show up. So what a tool. There, I said it. All right, let's continue.
Terrible duress, as we all lived. Did you notice what happened at Trump International Hotel? Closed. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quickly, this is raw politics, and the other side is real good at it. So, don't keep your eye on the ball. Look at the shiny object that we have over here. The shiny object is Donald Trump. But the fact is that's not what this hearing is about. Now, we can talk about how Donald Trump made profits, that he was a businessman and a very successful one before he became president. When he made the profits while he was in the presidency, he donated those profits back to Treasury. We can talk about the fact that the Biden family has only and always made their money off of government. But the real issue at hand here is none of that. The real issue at hand is about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and the relationship they had and the money that got filtered to the Biden family, that got filtered to Hunter because he was selling the presidency and the vice presidency. The real issue at hand is the fact that they made their money through the government and through influence peddling, and we want to find out more about that. What we're voting on today is not Donald Trump. It's none of it. But they want to have the public's eye on this other shiny object here. Let's keep the eye on the real issue, which is selling the United States government, which is selling foreign policy, which is doing the wrong thing. And Hunter and his dad were involved in it. We want to know more. And the last thing I'll say, Americans know. Anybody else, when they're subpoenaed and have to do a deposition, they do the deposition from a legal authority like the Judiciary Committee. But Hunter, once again, thinks he's above everybody else, separated from everybody else, and more powerful from everybody else, and that's wrong. And Americans know that too. Let's vote on the damn matter at hand and not digress on all these other issues. I yield back. I yield to Andy Biggs. I yield to my colleague, Congressman Biggs.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Vendrew. So this is an interesting diversion, as you say. It is a diversionary tactic. The reality is Hunter Biden, $24 million, and that is just a portion of what's been reported. But they're not interested in that. Not interested in that. He defies the subpoena. Not interested in that. We're going to raise something else. And so they're going to raise something else that's actually very intriguing because what happened to President Trump is he transferred management authority, but he also transferred titles to the trust. And when you transfer titles, that is an ownership transfer. You have to understand that, and contrary to what my colleague across the aisle said, from 400 affiliated entities. Now, the other thing that's really intriguing here is he was providing services, he's a magnate, he's got real estate holdings throughout the world. One of those holdings was in Manhattan. In 2008, Chinese company that my colleague just referenced entered into a contract to lease space. It wasn't some amorphous 20-some-odd shell corporations. It was a real entity providing real space, real value in exchange for money. That was in 2008. Let's see here. Oh, that was during Obama's term. It wasn't during Trump's term. It wasn't during his term. And so money that was paid in to that trust occurred during some of his time in office. But it went to the trust. But you're not going to hear that from the other side. They're going to argue this thing and try to make somehow a moral equivalency issue. And that's what's disgusting about this. Why don't they just admit Hunter Biden defied the subpoena? He willfully defied it. In fact, Mr. Ivey from Maryland told us earlier today, much earlier today, and this just seems to extend. He said, yes, Hunter told us he wasn't going to come in. He willfully defied it. Guess what that means? You're in contempt of the subpoena you got. You don't get to say, hey, I'm going to come in when I want to come in, how I want to come in. You were given a date to come in, a time to come in, a location to come in, and you went out and held a press conference saying, I ain't going in. That is contempt. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The question occurs on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
Opinion of the chairs and noes have it. Roll call being, because after the roll call, we will recess. I believe the minority has 2 more amendments, and we'll come back and deal with those and then vote on the final passage. But let's do this vote, and we'll go vote on the floor.
Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Issa? Mr. Issa votes no. Mr. Buck? Mr. Gates? Mr. Biggs. Mr. Biggs votes no.
Oh,
Mr.
another vote.
McClintock.
I think this was number 4.
Mr. Tiffany. Mr. Moran votes no. Mr.
Good
Moran
morning,
votes no.
Bobby.
Ms. Lee. Mr. Neguse.
Attempt to getting the media. Yeah.
Ms. McBath. Ms. Ballant.
The amendment is not agreed to. The committee will stand in
Mr. Chairman, there are 9 ayes and 18 noes.
Oops.
The amendment is not agreed to. The committee will stand in recess until the conclusion of this vote series and then come back for the finishing of the work for the day.
Okay, it resumes here roughly.
Than otherwise, right?
Oops.
When Republicans were in control, so it's,
I don't know. I get a kick out of watching these, but I've been watching these for 4 years by myself. Bobby says so that everyone can attempt at getting their media moment. Yeah, I mean, who would have thought that there'd be 3 going on at the same time? And I was telling you wrong on Rumble yesterday when I started the Mayorkas one, which in my opinion is the most important one because it deals with the border. But regardless, these Hunter Biden things have been hanging over our head for years. Again, Dan Bongino's book called Follow the Money, audiobook, is on my Rumble channel, and he narrates it. I'm pretty sure he narrates that one. But I mean, there's been how many books written about this, and it's just they deflect, I guess is the word, every single time. How many times did Don Jr. have to get subpoenaed for his that one meeting with the Russian, was it orphanage thing? Kind of a that whole thing. But yet this guy, he can buy a firearm, throw it in the garbage, leave cocaine behind in his vehicle, etc., etc., etc. It's well documented that they've been involved in this influence peddling scheme for years. And then they're like, oh, he made $5 million, through his hotels, Donald Trump did. Okay, so he signed it over. He had to sign it over to his sons while he was president. Are you telling me that they were supposed to close up shop on all of those hotels and golf courses for 4 whole years? The man gave his whole entire salary to charity every quarter. He had a thing, and he would give it to certain organizations. He was required to take $1 each quarter. He made $16 for the entirety of his presidency. It just, these people have no moral compass, I guess you could say.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to the committee report for the resolution.
I do prefer to do these at least on a delay on the day that they are, but there's just too many. And then the 2 I was planning for today, let's see. One was the impact of immigration on Social Security, super important. And the other one is the progressive policies within the U.S. military, also super important. But I don't think we're going to get to those now till tomorrow because we got to finish this one and then finish the other. I don't know why they did all of, I don't know. Who knows? Now I'm rambling. I thank you for joining me. I don't expect you to stay. There's trials going on. Broken Baker, the one he's doing this morning about the treehouse, looks interesting. But I'm glad you're here nonetheless to share in this cluster.
Recommending.
Objection, the amendment will be considered as read. The gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes on his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a good faith effort to try to pass an amendment. This is an issue I've worked on when Democrats were in control, when Republicans were in control, so it's not a partisan issue to me. It's really an issue about reclaiming Congress's power. Prior to World War II, the Supreme Court has ruled repeatedly that Congress has the power of inherent contempt. And what that allows Congress to do is when the executive branch, for example, the Department of Justice, if they don't enforce this subpoena, then there's really nothing that we can do. But there is actually something we can do. Through inherent contempt, Congress itself has authority under the Supreme Court law to fine witnesses and to even imprison witnesses. And so this paragraph simply puts in what the courts have said about Congress's inherent contempt power.
Because as all of you know, the problem that's going to happen if this resolution of contempt gets voted off the House floor is that because Hunter Biden substantially complied with the subpoena and because of the ongoing Department of Justice investigation, there is no way the Department of Justice is going to actually enforce this contempt proceeding. And then there's nothing that Republicans can do. But with inherent contempt, we wouldn't need the Department of Justice. We can use Congress's own power to do that. And this simply puts in the Supreme Court rulings on that. And so this would then set forward, if we want to do in the future, to then pass legislation, which would actually just be a rules change to allow the House to execute our inherent contempt power. And with that, I yield.
Gentleman, yield for a question?
Sure, I'll yield for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Liu. So if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Biden has Secret Service protection. Is that correct?
Yes.
So are you proposing to send the secret, or to send the Capitol, the Sergeant at Arms?
Thanks, Bobby. Like I said, I normally do all my politics stuff on Rumble, but I've met such wonderful people over the course of the last couple, 2-3 weeks. And frankly, some of them, have opposing political views and they stayed. That's kind of what I've always wanted with this channel. I mean, there's true crime on both sides of the political aisle. I appreciate that. Also, let me know what your Discord is, because I finally just set up a whole new Discord thing. I had one during the mass censorship of 2020. Couldn't find it, but that's fine. I got a Crime Spies one now. So let me know what your Discord thing is, and I will add you. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. And also, if anybody ever, wants to join in these subcommittee hearings, I mean, they're so similar to how everybody watches the trials, that I can do them in this Restream studio. It works just like StreamYard. You just get a link and pop in. I think if you have a Restream account, which it's a free account as long as you don't stream to Rumble, then you have to pay the upgrade package. But there is a way to also share the link. Like it's almost exactly like StreamYard, really. So anyway, there's that. All right, continue.
And presumably Capitol Police under his direction to
I'm
go to
still
the
asleep.
Secret Service
Half
and
asleep here.
take Hunter Biden from their custody?
I'm glad you asked that. And so we've thought about this issue, and that's why the bill I have introduced, both last term when Democrats were in control and this term when Republicans were in control, is to use inherent contempt power to fine witnesses. So this would levy $25,000 fines on a witness for refusing to comply with a congressional subpoena and increase that amount depending on how recalcitrant the witness is.
Has that power ever been determined to exist by the United States Supreme Court, or is that a novel issue?
It is not a novel issue because the Supreme Court has already ruled that Congress has the power to imprison.
Hi, Queen.
So if you have the power to imprison, then you would have the
Queen
power to do lesser kinds of enforcement penalties.
Well, I'll say
My other
with respect,
YouTube
because I'm not sure this is the
account is
correct
called Queen
vehicle
because my
for your proposal, but I'm somewhat drawn to
daughter's
it.
nicknamed
I
me
believe
Queen years
that
and years ago.
when Mr.
Nice to
Biden
meet
was
another
parading in the
queen.
halls earlier today, that would have been the solution. I
Okay,
think
I'll find you,
the
Bobby.
Sergeant at Arms should have taken him into custody, and he should have been held in custody until he completed his obligation to testify. So I appreciate the suggestion. We're of one mind on the proper way to resolve this, but and so thanks for the suggestion. I would say I also think it would probably be somewhat speculative to believe that because there's a power to imprison for contempt, that there must be a power to fine. I will say that the law of my state on contempt is directly to the contrary. One's allowed and the other is, the fine is prohibited, according to what I understand. So I yield back. Thanks, sir.
Thank you. So reclaiming my time, I know this paragraph is simply silent on that issue. It just lays out what the Supreme Court has said about the inherent contempt power.
I'll withdraw my point of order.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman yields.
Oh, yes, I yield
Gentleman yields back. The point of order is withdrawn. If I understand this correctly, this is, as the gentleman from California said, just restating what the United States Supreme Court has held. And of course, it seems the operative language is still the Speaker of the House may command the Sergeant at Arms to take a non-compliant witness into custody. I guess I'm kind of like where Mr. Bishop is. I don't really see an objection to this. So I think we can, unless someone wants to speak on the amendment, I would call the question on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted and becomes part of the report. The chair now recognizes. We ready? Do you have, is this the last amendment? Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Queen, I'm so used to being alone that the last 3 weeks has been
Anyone has an amendment at the desk?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Clerk will report.
the Rumble crowd always.
Point of order reserved
They're
for the
not
gentleman from
much of
Florida.
chatters usually, but
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of
Objection, the amendment considers
usually on
read.
YouTube, I'm
Someone's recognized to carry his
talking to my
amendment.
Thank you,
future
Mr.
self,
Chairman.
my future audience.
Want to note two things just in response to what's been happening so far today. One is the issue that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have raised about all of our amendments and comments dealing with President Trump.
I don't know, I've always
This
gotten a
doesn't
kick out of watching
raise
these.
him at all. And the other is that we haven't been
And
focusing
they do get,
on
like
the
on
issue
the
of Hunter
Rumble side,
Biden's
we
testimony.
we do have fun.
And I think this does exactly that. This is an amendment to the report language, so it doesn't actually change the language of the resolution that is the cover of the report that was floated. This does go to page 7 within the report that's been offered as an amendment. And what it does is
Oops, did
it
I
actually
type?
just clarifies and provides
That's
both
supposed to be
sides of the story
exclamation
to some
points.
extent. And the logic here
I need
is
to find my
typically in
brain.
reports that are issued, the majority does a report, minority can do a report if they'd like to. I think there were some time constraints here. But the important aspect here is this is a referral that's going to go to the Department of Justice, but if it's voted out on the floor. And I think it's important to make sure that the facts that we send over, which under the statute, this is what it would represent. It's based on what's in the report language. I think it need to be a fairly neutral and objective to the extent possible recitation of the facts so the Department of Justice can make a decision on whether or not to move forward with a grand jury investigation. What this does is it sort of lays out some of the facts I mentioned earlier. Chairman Comer inviting Hunter Biden to testify before the Committee on Oversight, offering to do that, and I won't read the particulars again, they're there in the language, but that he's invited to come anytime, and also that he can either come for a deposition or committee hearings, whichever he chooses. He chose public hearing. Now, I know my colleagues on the other side of the aisle think that's contemptuous. Part of me thinks that actually they might have actually reached an agreement which could be binding, and he took the committee up on it, and the committee actually breached the agreement. But we'll set that to the side for the moment. Just in the interest of fairness and balance, to provide this information.
Bobby,
which I think is undisputed,
there's a representative
about
from
the comments that
Tennessee that
Chairman
was
Comer
on with
made
News
that
Nation
invited
last night,
and offered to
and
allow
he said
public
Hunter Biden
testimony.
is
And I
filming a
think it's
documentary.
important in another respect,
So
too.
I'm pretty sure that was
a lot
all
of the comments
for
that have been made by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle
for
over the issue of
recording for the
trying to get
documentary.
the information, sort of a suggestion that there's
There's something
if we
else
don't
I tell
pass this
ya.
contempt
So that
request,
Hunter walking
that
out, that'll be
we
in
won't
the
be able to get the
next
information we want.
one we'll do
I
after
disputed
this
that
one.
and continue to dispute that. The offer to publicly testify gives us the information we need. Unlike some of the witnesses that
So this one
have come
hopefully
before
is
this
like
body, there's sort of two
maybe
big
a little bit
differences,
less
I
than an
think.
hour.
One is
Yep,
there's a
that
lot of
explains all the
information about
cameras.
publicly about what he would and would not say.
I thought that was
I think
interesting.
the facts that have been written out in the report, although I don't agree with them
He's such a
in large
putz.
part, and I think many of them are one-sided, but it appears that the committee has a good sense of what he would actually say.
I'll find the
So I don't know that that's really a
find the link.
challenge here or a problem. So at a minimum, let's send forward a report that gives a balanced view, at least on this particular issue, when we send it to the Department of Justice. And just the last point on this, the reason I think it's important to send this particular piece is I don't think he's actually denied or refused to comply with the subpoena. As a matter of fact, there's an offer, there's already been partial compliance. He's produced documents and the like, and made himself available to testify publicly and under oath. And so I think this actually could be relevant to if there's a court determination about criminal contempt. And let's be clear, this is not a civil contempt that we're talking about here. This is criminal contempt. And basically what the House would be alleging is that he's criminally refusing to provide information to the House of Representatives. I don't think that's right. I think that's contradicted not only by these facts, but by the fact that he offered to testify publicly and that we could get the information that we want through the public hearing. So I offer this language just in an attempt to have balanced language in the report. And I yield back.
Gentleman, excuse me, the gentleman yields back. The gentleman from
Withdraw my point of order.
Parliament, the point of order is withdrawn. The gentleman from North Dakota is recognized.
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
That's not basically what we're alleging. It's exactly what we're alleging. From the entire time this started and from this hearing, and I've been thinking a lot about how to address and deal with some of these issues, because a lot of what you deal with in contempt is wonky. And a lot of what we've dealt with back and forth in these hearings is really, really inside baseball. As an example, I spent 6 months in a skiff in the basement of the Capitol in a classified setting, listening to unclassified testimony. So if we're talking about open and transparent
have no balls. You are the epitome of white privilege, coming into the Oversight Committee, spitting in our face, ignoring a congressional subpoena.
This is the
to be
clip I was telling you
deposed.
about.
What are you afraid of? You have no balls to come up here.
What we're doing here today with this stupid attempt to hold Hunter Biden in contempt when he has come forward to say he will testify and give you everything you want, as the chairman of the committee repeatedly offered in public.
Raskin gets under my skin.
This was in Congress yesterday. Dramatic moments on Capitol Hill as Hunter Biden made that surprise appearance at a House Oversight Committee hearing on Wednesday. They were weighing a contempt of Congress charge.
So that's going to be the next one we watch after we finish the one we started yesterday.
Passed along with one from the Judiciary Committee, and now it moves on to the full House. But what a day of chaos. Joining us now is member of the Oversight Committee himself and a good friend to the show, Congressman Tim Burchett, Republican from Tennessee. Congressman, there's no theater like the halls of Congress. Yesterday was mayhem. Your initial thoughts when you looked up and you saw Hunter Biden and his legal team appear out of nowhere?
Well, I was going into the building, actually, and I saw the two Suburbans pull up, taxpayer-funded Suburbans with their sirens going, and I thought, what the heck's going on? And I kept getting texts from reporters all morning about, did I think Hunter Biden would show up? And obviously, they were tipped off to it. So were the Democrats. They had reserved 4 seats on the front row for him. And as it turns out, Hunter Biden is doing his own documentary. I'm not sure if it's a poor old me, Hunter Biden. They're coming after me because I received $20 million and didn't pay any taxes. But I would pretty much predict that his documentary, more people will be watching the reruns on the Cartoon Network than will be watching the Hunter Biden story.
So do you think that's what
it
his
was all
purpose
about.
was the documentary, or do you think there was more to it, a legal reason for he and Abby Lowell than just documentary purposes?
It's hard to say because when Marjorie Taylor Greene got the mic, they got up, and I've heard responses said they were there 30 minutes. They weren't there 30 minutes. I mean, if you were to count the time they got out of the car and the time they got back in their car, maybe. But it was just for show. It's just thumbing their nose at the system. There is two systems of justice in this country. There's people like the Bidens and that can get away with anything, and then there's the rest of us. We've seen it with the Epstein stuff with those folks. Where in the world does average citizens get by with this kind of nonsense? But in Washington, D.C., and in the ruling class. Ma'am, this is not a swamp anymore. It is an open sewer.
Yep.
And this is just a prime example of it. This was all staged. The Democrats knew he was coming. The press knew he was coming. The only people who didn't know he was coming was the Republicans.
Yeah,
and
you and all
frankly,
your
I
committee
felt like
members.
I felt like he should have been let out of there in chains.
Let me ask you this.
So I just wanted to play that clip for you. That's the one I saw this morning. Oops. Now, where did my thing go? That's the one I saw this morning. So again, we're going to finish out this committee hearing we started yesterday afternoon, which I forgot to put on pause here. And then I have a separate live stream set up for the House Oversight Committee, which is the hearing that he did attend. Again, why in the world they had 3 simultaneously going on, I have no idea. But we're going to try to get those earbuds instead of your mic. Oh, thank you. See, now I'm in this Restream studio. It could be. I'm half asleep. I don't know what I'm doing. All right, I will figure that out. Thanks, Bobby. All right, back to this.
According to what I understand. So I yield back. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So reclaiming my time, I know this paragraph is simply silent on that issue. It just lays out what the Supreme Court has said about the inherent contempt power.
I'll withdraw my point of order.
Oh, I see what it's doing.
Back.
There.
Gentleman yields.
Oh, yes, I yield.
Gentleman yields back. The point of order is withdrawn. If I understand this correctly, this is, as the gentleman from California said, just restating what the United States Supreme Court has held. And of course, it seems the operative language is still the Speaker of the House may command the Sergeant at Arms to take a non-compliant witness into custody. I guess I'm kind of like where Mr. Bishop is. I don't really see an objection to this.
Hi, you were wrong.
Unless someone wants to
Are
speak
you
on the
over in the
amendment,
rumbles
I would,
talking,
call
and
the-
I missed
call the
you?
question on the
It
amendment.
looked a little
All
bit
those in favor
ago.
say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted and becomes part of the report.
Well, I'm glad you're over here on the YouTube
Chairman
side.
recognizes.
You're wrong, meet Bobby Baloney, and Queen.
We ready? Yeah, it's just this is the last
So
one.
you're wrong. Actually, I found out, so you were there at the beginning of the Mayorkas one, and we did a
Gentleman from
separate one
Maryland is
with this
recognized.
one. Turns out, I didn't find out until later that the one that Hunter Biden came in on was the House Oversight Committee, not the Judiciary. So we're going to finish out
Gentleman has an amendment at the desk.
the rest of this Judiciary
Yes,
one.
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Clerk will report.
Hi, Farrell.
Point of order reserved by the gentleman from
The
Florida.
whole gang is here.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature
Objection,
of
the amendment will be considered as read. Gentleman is recognized to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr.
Oh,
Chairman.
we're going to finish this out, and then I got a separate one set up for
want
the
to note
House
two things just in
Oversight
response to
Committee.
what's been
That's the
happening so
one
far
that you
today.
saw the clips
One is the
about.
issue that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have raised about all of our amendments and comments dealing with President Trump. This doesn't raise him at all. And the other is that we haven't been focusing on the issue of Hunter Biden's testimony. And I think this does exactly that. This is an amendment to the report language, so it doesn't actually change the language of the resolution that is the cover of the report that was floated. This does go to page 7 within the report that's been offered as an amendment. And what it does is it actually just clarifies and provides both sides of the story to some extent. And the logic here is typically in reports that are issued, the majority does a report, minority can do a report if they'd like to. I think there were some time constraints here. But the important aspect here is this is a referral that's going to go to the Department of Justice but if it's voted out on the floor. And I think it's important to make sure that the facts that we send over, which under the statute, this is what it would represent. It's based on what's in the report language. I think it need to be a fairly neutral and objective to the extent possible recitation of the facts so the Department of Justice can make a decision on whether or not to move forward with a grand jury investigation. What this does is it sort of lays out some of the facts I mentioned earlier. Chairman Comer inviting Hunter Biden to testify before the Committee on Oversight, offering to do that, and I won't read the particulars again, they're there in the language, but that he's invited to come anytime, and also that he can either come for a deposition or committee hearings, whichever he chooses. He chose public hearing. Now, I know my colleagues on the other side of the aisle think that's contemptuous. Part of me thinks that actually they might have actually reached an agreement, which could be binding, and he took the committee up on it, and the committee actually breached the agreement. But we'll set that to the side for the moment. Just in the interest of fairness and balance, to provide this information, which I think is undisputed, about the comments that Chairman Comer made that invited and offered to allow public testimony. And I think it's important in another respect, too. A lot of the comments that have been made by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle go to the issue of trying to get the information, sort of a suggestion that there's, if we don't pass this contempt request, that we won't be able to get the information we want. I disputed that and continue to dispute that. The offer to publicly testify gives us the information we need. Unlike some of the witnesses that have come before this body, there's sort of two big differences, I think. One is there's a lot of information out there publicly about what he would and would not say, and I think the facts that have been written out in the report, although I don't agree with them in large part, and I think many of them are one-sided, but it appears that the committee has a good sense of what he would actually say. So I don't know that that's really a challenge here or a problem. So at a minimum, let's send forward a report that gives a balanced view, at least on this particular issue, when we send it to the Department of Justice. And just the last point on this, the reason I think it's important to send this particular piece is I don't think he's actually denied or refused to comply with the subpoena. As a matter of fact, there's an offer, there's already been partial compliance. He's produced documents and the like, and made himself available to testify publicly and under oath. And so I think this actually could be relevant to if there's a court determination about criminal contempt. And let's be clear, this is not a civil contempt that we're talking about here. This is criminal contempt. And basically what the House would be alleging is that he's criminally refusing to provide information to the House of Representatives. I don't think that's right. I think that's contradicted not only by these facts, but by the fact that he offered to testify publicly and that we could get the information that we want through the public hearing. So I offer this language just in an attempt to have balanced language in the report.
Oh, that was so kind of you, sir.
Excuse me, gentleman yields back. The gentleman from
withdraw my point of order.
So for those of you that didn't hear a few minutes ago, apparently Hunter Biden is filming a documentary. And one of the Republican members of the Oversight Committee, which is the hearing we'll watch after this one, this is House Judiciary, had mentioned that he's filming a documentary. So it kind of makes you wonder, did he show up and was that all for like show and drama? I don't know. We're all pretty smart people. My guess would be yes. So you have about an hour left of this one, and then
The point of order is withdrawn. The gentleman from North Dakota is
we'll do a
recognized.
separate live stream for the
move to
Oversight
strike the last word.
Committee.
Gentleman's recognized.
That's not
It's
basically
got
what we're alleging.
Raskin
It's
in
exactly
it,
what we're
so
alleging.
you're going to for sure want
From the entire time this
to
started
take your
and from
heart
this hearing, I've been thinking a
medication
lot
for
about how to address and deal with
He
some of these
drives me
issues, because a lot of
crazy.
what you deal with in contempt is wonky. And a lot of what we've dealt with back and forth in these hearings is really, really inside baseball. As an example, I spent 6 months in a skiff in the basement of the Capitol in a classified setting, listening to unclassified testimony.
Oh.
So if we're
I
talking
must have
about open and
rewound too
transparent
far.
and all of those different issues, but I think the more important issue is we've heard that Hunter Biden's a private citizen. I represented a lot of private citizens in federal court. Ain't any of them been treated like this. We talk about a special prosecutor being appointed, but he was
Yeah.
only appointed after a plea deal was thrown out that granted pretrial.
You're wrong says, notice those words. Those words, information we want to bring to the public. And I was actually mentioning yesterday because, again, I've just met such wonderful people through the Free Zachariah Anderson movement over the last couple weeks of the trial rewatch. I threw caution to the wind and added YouTube as one of the channels I was going to live stream the subcommittee hearings on. And I was so pleased that there were people from both sides of the political aisle that stayed for most of what we watched yesterday, or at least, longer than I had thought. And I had made a comment that, for those of you that don't watch these, for those of you that are in the true, the live stream trial crowd, that's basically what these hearings are. But the news media likes to pick out little tiny bits, like Bobby said earlier. They need their little clips. But in order to really get a grasp of what's going on with the border or with what have you, you got to listen to these subcommittee hearings. I've been listening to them for like 5 years. There's consequences from the public. These politicians have no incentive to extend those consequences to someone like Hunter. And again, it doesn't take, Columbo to figure out that when you listen to these subcommittee hearings, now that the GOP is in the majority, they're, attempting to get some traction on some of the stuff that the preceding 2 sessions of Congress, when they were in the minority, couldn't get going because those 2 were so consumed with trying to get 45 out of office. That was just a waste of 4 years of time. And 45's first 2 years, his first session of Congress that he had was in the majority, but it was led by friggin' Paul Ryan. So nothing got done. Nancy RN, hello. Too much housework to tackle. I appreciate you being here, Nancy. We're going to do this one, then we're going to do the other Hunter Biden one after this. Nancy RN is entering Fraser Crane mode. I'm glad you're joining me. So, as I was mentioning, in order to get the true facts, in my opinion, on what's happening in the country with respect to trafficking, with respect to the border, with respect to all sorts of different things, you're only getting your little nuggets through these House committee hearings. Now, granted, they are frustrating because, well, they just are. But I was really happy to see both political sides of the spectrum watching yesterday. It warms my
diversion for a
CrimeSpies
federal gun
heart.
charge and global immunity that far exceeded the overall base of the plea agreement. And keep in
I'm gonna
mind, that
work on
plea
my
agreement was
hat.
entered into after 2 different U.S. attorneys failed to prosecute this case. It's almost like if you would wait 2 years, 3 years and appoint a special prosecutor, then as the House is doing its investigation, you could claim, oh no, there's a prosecution going on. It's also a plea deal that apparently was granted after we had a DOJ report and people trying to get to a credible witness, and investigators all over the country were frustrated at every single step of the way. We have IRS witnesses that come in and say that every time they tried to investigate this stuff, it was taken off the table. And this had real consequences, real consequences. The statute of limitations passed. He can't be charged for the times for when these things occurred. Regular defendants don't get that treatment. They don't get that in federal court. I can tell you from spending a decade defending clients in federal court, there's never been a federal prosecutor anywhere in the country that is like, I'm really worried about your 5-year addiction. Here's your deferred prosecution. There's never been an investigator that says, you know what, we should just tamp down on this and not do anything, because if we wait long enough, if we just wait long enough, the statute of limitations will talk. So we keep talking about all of these different things, and we go through all of these different things. But I think kind of the best one to all of this is, you know what a regular citizen has never had happen in a federal case? They've never had a presidential transition team interfere with an FBI investigation. I've never had a client to have that happen. They've never had the Secret Service and a purely political committee set up solely for the purpose of helping a newly elected president transition into the role of the president interfere with the FBI's investigation or the IRS's investigation with his son. And you know what else you don't get to do when you get a subpoena? You just don't. You don't get to say, I will do it under my terms.
Well, you certainly don't get to.
I'm not going to sit under oath and deal with a prosecutor or deal with a congressional committee.
Certainly don't get to bleach
We've
bit
talked a lot about
and
whether
smash
we
your
can do
cell
that or can't
phones
do
with
that or we shouldn't do that
hammers.
or we shouldn't do that. We don't have
I do like Kelly.
The United States Congress can issue a subpoena. They can say how you want to do it. You can go back and you can negotiate terms, and you can deal with all of these things. We've dealt with this a lot, both in the majority and the minority. What you don't get to do is hold a press conference on the front of the Capitol steps with your lawyer and say, I'm only doing it the way I want to do it. Maybe just this one time, Hunter Biden shouldn't get special favorable treatment with prosecutors and judges and IRS agents and statute of limitations. Maybe just this one time, he shouldn't be a spoiled little rich kid with a really important dad who actually is 50 years old, and he should comply with the subpoena, or at least in good faith negotiate how to comply with the subpoena, instead of holding press conferences and having the Secret Service sweep an oversight room so he can come in and do a political stunt. Maybe just this one time we should do it that way. So
Would the gentleman yield for a question?
Sure.
Okay, none of that goes to the amendment, but just for the sake of the discussion. Well, if you want to hear those things, I mean, if we brought him in and he testified, you could hear all of that, right? Today, I suppose. He just asked to have it in public. And the poor little rich kid piece, I mean, let's be clear. A poor little rich kid
All right, reclaiming
with a
my
public
time. You can get
defender
some of those.
would have taken the fifth, right?
Well, I'm saying as a public defender defending people, they don't get to tell the authorities how they're going to testify, when they're going to testify, what conditions they're going to do. And if they do, they negotiate it in good faith. They don't stage political stunts. They don't have, I've never had a client be able to use the
Comer,
Secret Service to take over a room
ZZZ,
to do
welcome.
a political stunt. But that's neither here nor there, so I yield back.
Thanks, Bobby.
Move to strike last word.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
I'm going to end today, because I think we're probably about done, where we started, which is that I and my colleagues pointed out that the chairman is 600 plus days in defiance of a congressional subpoena. My colleague from North Dakota who just spoke said no one should ever be allowed to set the terms for their own subpoena compliance. And he's never seen somebody defy a congressional subpoena like this. Mr. Van Drew from New Jersey has throughout the day said there's rules for thee, but not for me. That's what Hunter Biden is asking. And then the chairman, in a very defensive response to the point we've made about his own subpoena defiance, said, well, all I wanted to do was I sent an 11-page letter and I was willing to testify, I was willing to negotiate. Well, that sounds a hell of a lot like what Hunter Biden is doing when Chairman Comer says, come in publicly or privately. He says, I'll come in publicly. Then you say, well, it has to be privately. And then he comes in willing publicly twice in the last month. So to use Mr. Van Drew, is it rules for thee, but not for me, Mr. Chairman?
Gentleman, you?
Is it rules for thee and not for me? Because that's what it really feels like is going on here. So again, to end where we started, it is absurd that this committee, where its own chairman is in defiance of a congressional subpoena, is holding a hearing about somebody else who actually wants to show up and testify publicly for their own congressional subpoena.
Gentleman yield? No, he won't.
Gentleman yields back. The
course not.
Gentleman from Oregon is recognized, and we'll come to the gentleman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm struck again by the failure to understand the value of the deposition process and the need for deposition in a matter so important as this. It amazes me. We're busy talking about one of the most important things this Congress can do, and that's look into the alleged impeachable activities of a president. And here we are talking about having one of the key, if not the key witness.
I think at this point it's not even a legend anymore. There's pure fact behind it.
As a civil trial lawyer, I've
For
been through,
years.
as I mentioned before, dozens upon dozens of depositions, and you take depositions to get the facts. You don't do it just because it's fun to do. You don't do it just because.
Remember Tony Bobulinski right before the 2020 election had that thing with Tucker Carlson documenting the chairman's activities and his association with Hunter Biden.
You can fill out a lot of hours. You
That
do it
was
because if you don't do it,
over
you're
3
guilty of
years ago.
malpractice. So to hear those who have a background in the law suggest that we should simply place a witness of this importance in front of this committee with all the stilted rules that go with it is ridiculous. And what should be happening is we should be focusing upon what we're about here today, which is to determine whether or not the President of the United States engaged in selling his influence through his son. And it's been repeatedly pointed out that his son had nobody else to sell but his dad. And so for goodness sakes, when people come in and say, there's no evidence, you go, what was Hunter Biden selling? His influence? Come on. So the point is, why would we commit malpractice by failing to take the deposition of Hunter Biden, particularly where the rules of our organization, this Congress, say that we have every authority to do it? Why? And then as far as the amendment goes, and of course, I forgot to say strike the last word on this amendment. The amendment is surprisingly specious because it fails to take into account the rest of the story. So where it says, given your client's willing to address the investigation publicly, we'd expect him to be willing to testify in Congress. It certainly doesn't say, and avoid taking a deposition. Come on, this kind of approach.
Would the gentleman yield?
Actually,
No,
Okay.
don't yield to
what I'm anxious
them.
to make clear is that this group of folks here, we congressional folks, owe a duty and obligation to
Again, the last 4 years, well, the last year, they've been in the majority, but the preceding 4 years, when the GOP was in the minority, and they would ask the Democrats to yield, their microphones were shut off. Freaking Nadler just about broke the hammer all the time, banging over the thing. It was just a shit show, nonstop shit show. I think the GOP, they've had a whole year now to play nice. No more nice.
the American people to get to the bottom of this, and the way you do it is by taking the deposition first, and then you bring the witness in later. You don't put a witness down here and then try to jam exhibits under his nose or her nose, whoever's nose. You take the deposition. There's a reason.
Farrell asks, is that the friend who is part of it? Tony Bobulinski was actually hired. I forget now if it was, it's on the tip of my tongue. No, not Burisma. He was hired as part of one of Hunter Biden's, and I think it was the Hunter Biden Devin Archer company to be like part of that. And then he had that interview with Tucker Carlson that basically blew the whistle on who the chairman was. Devin Archer's thing. Devin Archer actually, I think it was 6-7 months ago, had an interview also with Tucker Carlson. I mean, if you haven't seen any of these, I can always add it to a list, and we can do those too for those of you that may have missed it over the years. And then also, so we're gonna do Tony Bobulinski, Tucker. Oh God, Tucker Carlson's just killing it now. Devin Archer. That was maybe like 6 months ago. Tucker. Actually, with regards to J6, the one I haven't seen, that's a different subject, but the J6 topic, Tucker Carlson just had an interview with Representative Clay Higgins, MFH to some of you. And that I'd like to do. That I'm pretty sure I can't do on YouTube. There was a time where I played a clip from Dan Bongino on YouTube when we were watching a House subcommittee hearing, and it got thrown in jail, and I had to appeal it. And then also with regards to Hunter Biden, for those of you that like to listen to audiobooks, I've got Follow the Money by Dan Bongino, which is the whole entire story. It's not very long either. I think it's like 6 hours. And then I also have Laptop from Hell by Miranda Devine. So I'll find those links. Problem with Rumble is you can't put it on a playlist, but I'll try to find them for you. Okay, this one I think is almost finished.
And that's
Then
why
we get to
years
move to the
ago
one
we added
with
depositions
Raskin
as
in
a
it.
tool to the investigative toolbox.
Rip our hair out.
We didn't. If it wasn't a useful approach, it wouldn't be in our rules. I would recommend
Oh,
again,
no
as I asked
problem,
the
Farrell. You sleep.
CRS committee discretion and
study the
obtaining
back
witness
of your
testimony
eyelids.
report be made part of the
Thank
record.
you
People
for
have to go read
stopping
it,
in.
and you'll see a deposition is not a hearing; it's a deposition. There's no House committee rule that regulates the committee's choice between obtaining testimony by deposition or in a hearing. In other words, we get to do this the way we want and the way the chair wants to do it.
So
If
I
you
did not
continually
know
bring
that
up
you
other
were
situations as a justification for not following these rules, well,
live
someday you may
streaming
have
with
that opportunity,
Shizzy.
but not today. Today's about Hunter Biden.
I'll make a
Chairman,
note.
Gentleman from Oregon yield this way?
Chair, I yield to.
Would you yield, gentlemen?
Yeah, sure.
I think in furtherance of your point, because you made this point about, and I think even if the submission or the alteration of the report were otherwise appropriate as opposed to just a minority report, I say to the gentleman from Maryland that this sentence says, yet again on November 8, 2023, Chairman Comer, along with Chairman Jordan, replied to Mr. Biden's attorney stating, quote, given your client's willingness to address this investigation publicly up to this point, we would expect him to be willing to testify before Congress, close quote. It suggests that that was left open that way, so that when Mr. Biden's attorney responded in November 28, talking about coming to a public hearing, that was open for discussion, but it omits this very important first paragraph of the letter of November 8. The Committee on Oversight and Accountability and the Committee on the Judiciary are subpoenaing Mr. Robert Hunter Biden to appear for a deposition. And then the end of that paragraph, attached to this letter is the Oversight Committee's subpoena. The Judiciary Committee's subpoena will be transmitted to you separately. There was no open offer by Jamie Comer for Hunter Biden to say, oh, I'll do that. If that, you suggested the contract analogy wouldn't apply anyway, but it doesn't even, it's selective. It doesn't even represent the facts as they occurred. Thank you, gentlemen, from Oregon. I'll yield back to you.
Gentleman yields back.
Yield back, Mr. Chair.
The gentlelady from Texas is recognized on the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I rise to support the gentleman from Maryland's very thoughtful
I
amendment.
remember what her scandal is.
Ivy.
She's got something to do with one of her
I would
aides.
simply ask a rhetorical question, expecting no answer from my good friend, so I will answer it myself, which is whether or not Mr. Biden, in this instance, Hunter Biden and his counsel, did they not express and respond to...
Carol says, you should join us sometime. We're doing politics stuff right away in the morning. On my work days, I join him about... Oh! Okay. Let's make a note of that, and I should add that to the description. Oh my God, I'm so happy to see people aren't afraid of politics. Good. Good, good, good. That's good news. The morning whiz and coffee. I've been meaning to, oops, see now I'm clipping again. I've been meaning to do Covfefe and Crime, a morning political like news thing. I just haven't ever gotten a chance to launch it. I have a thumbnail and I've got an opening intro video with coffee poured. Covfefe and Crime. Okay, almost done here.
to the entreats, to the outreach of the
Morning
chairman of the
whiz and
Oversight
coffee.
Committee? The answer was yes, they responded. Did the Oversight Committee have any number of offerings?
Actually, Farrell, I'll add that into the description of the political ones. Boy, am I happy to. I'm happy I threw caution to the wind yesterday and decided to add YouTube as a channel to these hearings.
Now, that is not the responsibility of the particular party in question.
You never know who you're going to
But
offend.
Americans have a right when called before Congress, as they have a right if called before the court, to precisely
love
be
that.
able to listen to, in this instance, the chairman, or in this another instance, the judge, in the preciseness of their commentary. Chairman Comer clearly said and invited Mr. Biden to testify in public, saying, we're in the downhood phase of this investigation now because we have so many documents. Oh, let me repeat that again. So many documents. In my previous amendment, I made it clear. They were overwhelmed with the thousands and tens of thousands of documents. So many documents, and we can bring these people in for deposition or committee hearings, whichever they choose. Do we not have the responsibility of being precise and for the American people to be able to be guided by our words and the veracity of our words and the guidance of our words and the direction of our words? And yet again, on November 8th, yes, the letter came along with Chairman Jordan. Chairman Comer replied to Mr. Biden's attorney stating, given your client's willingness to address this investigation publicly up to this point, we would expect him to be willing to testify before Congress. And that is what they have expressed, their willingness to testify before Congress. And so I believe Mr. Ivey's language should not offend anyone. He simply wants a report to reflect the words of chairman of a full committee, which we should hold that chairman to their words, the words and letter of both the chairman of the Judiciary and Oversight that made it clear that Mr. Biden had accepted the responsibility of testifying before Congress. And the exact words in this iteration does not indicate how, but we do know that Mr. Biden, Hunter Biden, showed up. So I wanted to rise to say that why would you not allow the report simply to be amended so the truth could be told? When I came back and expressed my concern with the FD 1023 on this issue of uncorroborated human testimony, it was just simply to clarify the record. That's all Mr. Ide is trying to do. He may be wanting to do more, and I'm happy to be able to yield to him at this moment, but I wanted to join him in supporting of this amendment because I do believe, Mr. Chairman, you should allow the amending of the record simply to say and chronicle Mr. Biden's willingness to respond. He did respond. His counsel did respond. They were willing and able to testify publicly. Gentlemen, be happy to yield to the gentleman.
I thank the gentlelady. And just in support of that, and just to address some of the comments that were made a few minutes ago with respect to Congress having the authority to seek depositions, and why wouldn't they always do that in these kinds of investigative hearings? The only point I would make is obviously Congress doesn't have to do that, but nobody forced Chairman Comer to come out and offer to allow him to have public testimony. He did that on his own, and he was the chairman of the committee that was leading the investigation in part. Secondly, with respect to my friend from North Carolina, I take the point about this particular amendment not including everything, but the point of the amendment was all of that stuff's already in the draft report that you guys have floated and seek to have adopted and forwarded as the referral. So my amendment didn't include all of the points that you're trying to make because it's already in there. The points that you're trying to make about, Hunter Biden did something wrong, this, that, or the other, they're already in the report and very thoroughly. This is just a kind of a rifle shot effort to balance out this piece of it. And to the extent all of you all feel like, we still want the information, that's why we want to go. This doesn't derail the contempt citation. It just provides not even both sides, but part of the other side.
Gentlelady's time having expired. Who else seeks recognition? The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized, Mr. Van Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just can't let this go. I know we all want to get back to our offices and the work at hand, but every time the other side keeps trying to move us away from the subject at hand, which is Hunter Biden and his willful and purposeful and blatant disregard for the law and his willful and purposeful disregard for the American people and also to the United States Congress and this committee. This isn't about Donald Trump. This isn't about Jim Jordan. Now, let's just talk about that for a second. This is a standing committee of the United States House of Representatives. We have members on both sides of the aisle. We debate, we discuss. At times we have colloquies. There is a balance. This committee that Chairman Jordan was subpoenaed to go to did not have that balance. It was a select committee that was set up to go after individuals politically, including President Donald Trump. It was wrong, but nevertheless, Jim Jordan never said he wouldn't go. He just wanted to know what the parameters would be. And the reason they didn't get back to him on that long letter he sent to them is because they knew they were in quicksand. They knew they were in trouble. They knew they didn't have an appropriate committee. It was a partisan committee. They might as well go before the Democrat DNC as well as go before that committee. And then we talk about rules for thee and not for me. I will still say, without question, Hunter Biden gets special treatment. He got special treatment after he illegally bought a gun. He got special treatment when he didn't pay his taxes. And the special treatment was going to be a real plea deal that he would be responsible for none of it. And I will still say that the average American who may or may not be watching this hearing knows that it wouldn't damn well happen to them, that they'd be in big trouble. And it is only because of one honest judge in Delaware that she said, I can't do this. The Justice Department put together this special deal for the president's son. I can't do it. It just isn't right in the plain vernacular in English, and this has to move forward. And now it does move forward. We all have to obey the rule of law, or should be. And to my colleague, Congressman Swalwell, he's a member of Congress. That matters. We have a responsibility. And he flouts and touts the fact that he went around with Hunter Biden, who openly, defiantly, literally disobeyed the rule of law. Didn't say, hey, I want certain framework when I go in there and do depositions. If you've got nothing to worry about, if you haven't done anything wrong, you're not afraid to go before a committee, and you're also not afraid to go before a deposition. That obviously shows his fear that he's done wrongdoing. But he thought, once again, as he has over and over and over again, the way he's made his money, the way he's been treated in his criminal charges, he thought, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to say I'm a special guy. The rules don't apply to me. They apply to every other American, but damn it, I can do what I want. And Eric Swalwell supports that. Congressman Swalwell, my colleague, I can't believe that. Ladies and gentlemen, this is raw politics. It's abusive politics. It's harmful politics. This is easy. You were subpoenaed. You obey the subpoena by a real committee, not a hack job, not a political committee, not a committee that's out to get you, that only has Democrats or people that hate you on it. This is a standing committee, and we have strong membership on the other side. And they could defend Hunter Biden and say he had nothing to do with his father, nothing to do with criminal activity, nothing to do with not registering as a foreign agent, nothing to do with using the United States of America, its foreign policy, and its domestic policy for their own gain. Let's talk about the matter at hand. Hunter Biden disobeying and refusing to comply with the rule of law. This isn't politics. This is government. This is public policy. This is doing things the right way. That's all we want to do. It's all we should be discussing today. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Anyone else in recognition? Gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a classic case of putting politics over people. My friends on the other side of the aisle have been playing politics ever since they went through the 3 weeks back in January of 2023, first trying to elect a speaker. Took them 3
Okay, we're bumping him
weeks
up to
of
1.5
dysfunction and
because he
paralysis in
really
his body.
talks
We couldn't do
slow.
anything but go to the floor and vote for Hakeem Jeffries. But he was not able to win, and they finally elected their speaker of their choice, but then they ended up yanking him 9 months later, and we went through another 2 weeks of dysfunction and paralysis in this body. But in the interim period between those times, and then thereafter up to this time, my friends on the other side of the aisle in 2 committees have been embarked upon a very thorough investigation, leaving no stone unturned. They've subpoenaed thousands of documents. Those documents they have received from the Biden-Harris administration. There's no allegation that nobody has been forthcoming with documents. All of the documents that they've requested, they've received. They've got them from the Biden-Harris administration, from banks, from private citizens, from family members. It's been a complete and thorough gathering of documents. Thousands. Chairman Comer even referred to it as, quote, a mountain of evidence. And within all of that evidence, plus they have deposed over a dozen witnesses without, by the way, releasing any transcripts, the full transcripts of those
I need to
depositions.
be better
they have
at,
taken
like,
morsels of
on
the
the spot
depositions and
fact-checking.
mischaracterized them in public, which is what they want to do
Also.
with Hunter Biden, which is why he smartly has offered to submit to a public testimony, a public hearing with his testimony under oath. And he did not say that he would take the fifth. If he was intending on doing that, he would not have offered to testify. And so there's a reason why they don't want his public testimony. It's because out of all of the documents and witnesses that they have been through up to this point over the last year, 2 committees, they've not come up with any evidence, not a thimbleful of evidence, not even a little toenail worth of evidence, not even a pinhead worth of evidence. No evidence whatsoever have they received that shows that President Biden has engaged in any criminal misconduct, but yet they want to use this deposition to try to impugn his character. They know that they are not going to be successful in impeaching and convicting President Biden, but what they want to do is take this deposition and then try to use whatever morsels of it they can to just tar the president and Hunter Biden in the process. And Hunter Biden is not falling for it, and the American people are not falling for it because they know that it's better to get public testimony in a public hearing that everybody can watch on C-SPAN than it is to be questioning somebody in a clandestine, secret back room with no reporters present, the public excluded. You do it in secrecy. The American people realize that that benefits y'all. That doesn't benefit Hunter Biden. It benefits y'all. And so, but it benefits the public to get a clear finding on national TV that this is a witch hunt and it's not about anything other than your desire to bring down Biden and promote Donald Trump. And so let's stop beating around the bushes. Let's call this what it is, a fishing expedition. Let's get on to the business that the American people want us to do in this committee. We've already had 1 school shooting this year already. Let's do something about guns in this society, out of control guns. Let's do the work of this committee that benefits the American people instead of playing politics over the people. And with that,
time has expired. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Indiana, Ms. Sparks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brave. I guess we cannot be Representative Jayapal phrase, but I didn't realize that depositions are considered to be clandestine operations. No, I actually thought, and I'm the attorney, but I saw this actually as my Representative Benz put out. It was a part of actually a proper part of a legislative process and investigation. It's actually, and Hunter Biden will have an opportunity to also do a public comments too. But I think the proper way is this goes through, such a serious matter in consideration, and if he truly believes that he needs to make a case, there are a lot of serious allegation questions he needs to answer. So I think it's unfortunate that the other sides try to spin it. I think this is a part of the process, and I think if we believe in the rule of law and the processes in respect of this committee investigation going further, we should really enforce our subpoenas, especially in serious investigations like that. And I think we need to go further with this, and I hope that my colleagues will support and maybe some people on the other side will think twice before setting a precedence what we're doing, because we're playing too many politics with people's lives.
Individually? Would you yield to me?
Yeah, yes, I did. I yield.
It must be interesting to Americans watching, hearing about depositions being clandestine, who might have a figment of a memory that there was an entire impeachment conducted in the skiff. And the other thing is, although we're overturning some stones, we have not yet overturned any islands. So that should
Actually, I think it was like 6 months or so ago, they were talking about, remember when there was the raid that happened in August on Mar-a-Lago, and people were saying, oh, those documents, they were all over the place. Well, granted, but I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Mar-a-Lago actually has a skiff in it. I forget who the woman was that built it. Was she like heiress to the Post, like cereal family? But she had wanted it to be, when she built it, she had it in mind as the Winter White House. So there's actually a skiff inside of Mar-a-Lago. If you go to Google, just type in skiff Mar-a-Lago, and there's an article from, I think, 2017. That's an interesting read. Also, in the description box underneath, I have added that feral housewife, guest star, or guests on occasion, Shizzy Whiznuts channel, The Morning Whiz. And then there's also some recommended. I put Tucker interviews with Tony Bobulinski. Got to remember how to spell his name. Fall of 2020. His interview with Devin Archer. Rumble Audiobook, Follow the Money. Rumble Audiobook, Laptop from Hell. And then future live streams. I want to do Tucker interviews. Rep Clay Higgins regarding J6. I have to be really careful with this politics stuff on YouTube because I have gotten thrown in jail for it before. So I have to be kind of cryptic, and I can't, like, the interviews with Tony, you might have to like Google search them, because they have some new thing that they put in their policies that say, if you post a link in the chat or in your description, or I'm pretty sure if you verbally even talk about it, that they don't find safe, they can throw you in jail for that. I mean, why not?
Could be good. I go back to the gentlelady from.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would urge my colleague to not support this amendment, but support this resolution. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Any others seeking recognition? Seeing none, the question occurs on the amendment. Offered by the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Ivey. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to.
Ask for a recorded vote.
Gentleman seeks a recorded vote. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan. Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Issa. Mr. Moran.
This is the fifth one.
At the desk.
Clerk will report.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Gentleman from Florida reserves a point of order.
To the committee report.
Objection. The amendment will be considered as read. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I offer this amendment in another effort to sort of see if we can reach an agreement to work together in a bipartisan way to address these concerns. This language is seeking to, as my Republican colleagues keep saying, obtain testimony for the committee by permitting the Hunter Biden to testify at a public hearing within 30 days of the passage of the contempt resolution. The reason I'm offering this language is, well, there's several reasons. One is, this is a criminal contempt motion, essentially under its current form. The irony is that, of course, criminal contempt isn't designed to compel testimony, unlike civil contempt. It's designed to punish. This would give more of a civil contempt kind of feel to it. If the goal is really to get the information and get the testimony from Hunter Biden, this would be an additional opportunity to do that. The objections to the public testimony, I know the civil deposition argument, we've heard them before, and just view them differently. I think the civil depositions are fine, but not mandatory by any stretch. I note again that Chairman Comer offered to permit public testimony and was taken up on that offer. I also note that, certainly in criminal cases, you almost never have depositions. People are put on the witness stand, they testify at hearings. They may have testified before grand jury, but frequently not. So, and as I mentioned before, this is not a scenario where the committee would be flying blind if Hunter Biden sat down and was testifying publicly. We've got tens of thousands of pages of documents. You've got 90 witness statements that have been taken by this committee and by others, oversight and others here in the House. And the public information through the press is beyond extensive on this matter. So I don't know that the approach of it having to be a deposition is the sort of trap that the other side seems to be suggesting, but it would be a quick and immediate way to get the information. And so I will say, just to conclude here, we want to get the information. There's conversations or statements that have been made by colleagues on the other side about negotiating subpoenas. This would be essentially sort of a variation of that. Let's see if we can get the information. Criminal contempt, once we started on that train, it doesn't stop based on whether he complies or not. It just keeps going. So if you really want the information, I don't know that this is the best way to go about it. And so I offer this amendment as an effort to try and reach an agreement where we can actually get the testimony from Mr. Biden that the Republicans say that they want so desperately. Let's bring him in. Let's give him some additional time. Passage of the resolution will be a statement from the House expressing how serious the committee is and the House is about wanting this information. We won't be derogating any rights of the committee by passage or adopting this provision. Let's find a way to work together and get this done.
Gentleman, yield for a quick.
I will.
So, but if I understand, and I was listening carefully to your argument, but I'm also reading what your amendment would do is say Hunter Biden wins. That is to say, he set the terms of his testimony to come into a public hearing at his, just the way this public hearing process works, 5 minutes a person and all that stuff, as opposed to doing a deposition. You're saying concede that to him, just do what he wants.
Well, a couple quick things on that front. The 5 minutes was discussed earlier, and there's multiple examples of that over the history of the House and the Senate. We don't have to do it that way. We could designate an individual member or counsel. They can do the questioning for 45 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever we want. We could go back and forth just like we do in the depositions. That would be one way to go, that would get the testimony and get the information.
Your terms might be acceptable to me. I don't know what the will of the committee would be. So are you saying, and I wonder if the ranking member, if not you, because he mentioned this earlier, are you saying that Hunter Biden would like to come in and conduct a deposition, following the rules of the deposition, in public?
He said public hearing. I don't know that there's a difference between deposition, in quotes, and hearing.
Would the gentleman yield?
I would.
I remarked previously that one of the Republicans, I forget which one, had said that that having Hunter Biden testify in front of the committee would be fruitless because of the 5-minute rule, and you couldn't sustain a proper questioning then. And I said, well, in that case, we would certainly not object if the Republicans wanted to hold a public hearing by the rules of a deposition. That is to say, the Republicans get an hour to question him, and then Democrats get an hour to question him, and so forth and so on. And that's what I said, and we certainly wouldn't object. And that should meet the objections of the Republicans.
Mr. Chair.
I yield back to the...
Until time has expired, the gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Carrying that point further, I'd yield to the ranking member if he's able to say that Mr. Biden is prepared to do that. Does Mr. Biden wish to sit down and attend a deposition in public?
I haven't spoken to Mr. Biden, but he has said repeatedly publicly that he is perfectly willing to testify in public, that he is eager to testify in public. So I would assume he would be willing to do that.
So as for me, I would say that the time for him to offer that, if he wanted to do it. So it's an interesting proposition, and I think it would be fantastic. Mr. Ivey thinks it's a good idea. The ranking member thinks it's a good idea. So, but nobody's prepared. Nobody can say, yeah, well, Hunter Biden's willing to do this.
No one has asked.
So we're at a certain.
No one has asked him.
No. But there have been letters back and forth across time.
Gentleman yield?
I will, Mr. Chairman.
Well, it seems to me the time to ask him is if this goes the way we anticipate, and there's a vote to hold him in contempt from the committee before it goes to the floor. There's going to be those kind of discussions take place between Mr. Lowell and Mr. Kastner, our counsel, and the counsel for Hunter Biden, and we'll figure it out from there if that's something that's actually real or not. But
Chairman,
right now,
I move to adjourn to figure out if this is something Mr. Biden is amenable to.
Gentleman's not recognized. The time belongs to the gentleman from North.
Sounds like you're not interested.
And it's my time. But I think that's exactly right. So we move through this. Again, as I said a long time ago, hours ago, it's cut and dry. It's open and shut. The contempt is clear. And then I will yield to the ranking member.
The Hunter Biden's lawyer has written several times, I don't know how often, but has written several times offering Mr. Biden's testimony.
Right. But it's been sort of, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's been sort of like circus type atmosphere that he's seeking to create is my interpretation of what he's done. But, and in fact, their correspondence need not ever have come particularly to public notice, but he's never suggested this. I've read the correspondence. He's never suggested having a deposition.
Why don't we see if they're amenable to this then?
Well, I think the time to do that, as Mr. Jordan said, is after we've gotten through the point that we brought all these people together and had all this debate over the subject that is at issue. Let's get the resolution through, and then say, I yield to the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Wright.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick points. I don't know that there's a real distinction between deposition testimony and public hearing testimony.
Come on, Glenn.
I'm just saying, the way it would be structured, we did this with the Whitewater hearings, it was done with Iran-Contra. Most of the investigative hearings actually do it the way that the chairman suggested. You're calling it a deposition. That's how they work in these public hearings anyway. Counsel is designated to question for however long each side agrees, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever. Members can then ask questions if they want. But the point about it getting lost in the 5 minutes, it could be addressed in that way. And then secondly, remember the point I made a few minutes ago. Once we send this on a criminal contempt track, it's beyond our hands once it gets voted off the floor. So we're not negotiating after that to try and address it. It's in the hands of the Department of Justice.
I understood. And reclaiming my time, that's the point the chairman just made, is there's an opportunity, and it's something focused of an opportunity, I would say, because it's not going to be unlimited amount of time, but there's time to deal with that before it becomes, before it goes to the floor and gets the referral.
Would the gentleman yield?
And so let me yield to the I think the chairman wants to talk to you. The gentleman from Florida? Yield to you.
Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Ivey. Would 30 days seems a bit dilatory to obtain bipartisan support? Would you go to 14?
Yeah, I'd just pick 30 out of the air. I mean, I thought the issue was...
I'll yield back.
I just thought the issue was giving a chance after the resolution passed to reach an agreement when, normally speaking, you can't do it anymore. So that's all. Just include additional time to negotiate.
Would the gentleman yield?
I would.
Well, I guess it's my time.
North Carolina's time. I apologize.
I yield to the ranking member.
Thank you. As has been stated, to vote a contempt now and then see if Mr. Biden is amenable is putting the cart before the horse. Why don't we recess this hearing, see if he's amenable. If he is, call him in under the rules that the majority will agree to, and have the proper, what's it called, the proper hearing.
Recessing is the prerogative of the chair, I'm pretty sure, but well, I guess anybody can move. But anyway, I'm not intending to do that, and I think that the idea would be to get it finished. My time's about, I'll yield my time back.
Gentleman yields back. I think the gentleman from Oregon seeks time, and the gentleman from New Jersey. So we'll go to Mr. Benz first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to say this is no way to reach an agreement on how to handle Hunter Biden. This is not the way to do it. Okay. The reason that the chairman is given the authority of determining how to get this thing worked out is because it's difficult, complicated, and should be up to him. And so to be doing this now is ridiculous. And what should be happening, I hope, is that Hunter Biden will be held responsible for not showing up for the deposition that he was subpoenaed to show up at. That has not changed. He didn't show up. He's guilty of, as I said earlier, spitting in the eye of Congress, and why we would let him off the hook for that, I do not know. That would be more special treatment for a guy that has received far too much. And so that's my own humble opinion. As far as how this should proceed from this point, one, we should proceed with holding Hunter Biden in contempt, as he is. And then secondly, we should be turning to our chair and finding out, letting him negotiate how we want this to turn out. That's how this is supposed to be done. And again, why would we approach a matter of such incredible importance? The President of the United States, there's enough smoke, if you will, to have all of we Republicans vote for an impeachment inquiry. To suggest that there's nothing there is ridiculous. There's a lot there. And by the way, I think the word that Congressman Johnson was seeking earlier was punctilio, the smallest possible thing in a procedure. That's not what we have here. Here we have evidence, massive amounts of evidence indicating that Hunter Biden was selling influence. And so,
would the gentleman yield?
No, I will not.
Would the gentleman yield?
Mr. Speaker, that's really all I have to say, other than I would not support trying to cobble together something here to apply to Hunter Biden in a matter that is of such great importance.
Well,
I yield back to.
Would you gentlemen yield back?
I'll yield to, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I suggested the time to have these negotiations is after this passes the committee, which I think is going to happen, and before we go to the floor, we would have that. We have tried numerous times, our counsel, to reach out to Mr. Lowell, Mr. Biden's counsel, to no avail. So we've been trying. Maybe once they understand about this debate and what's being offered by the gentleman from Maryland, maybe that'll happen. But I do think we should proceed with the resolution as is. And with the gentleman, I'll yield back to the gentleman from Oregon. Would he yield to the gentleman from New Jersey? Gentleman from New Jersey.
I thank the gentleman, I thank the chairman, and I respect Mr. Ivey, and I mean that. I totally disagree with this. We're going back again It's the rules for thee and not for me. So Hunter Biden's going to get special treatment. He doesn't get deposed like everybody else does
I
because
see
he's
how
the
it
president's
goes.
son. Even though he's done bad
trying to
things,
fix my
he gets special
camera.
treatment. This process should go through as we've
I didn't-
outlined it. If they want to have negotiations and say, okay, now I will
you
go
can
to
see
the
my Christmas
depositions
lights
and then
better.
I will go to the public hearing, that's fine. That's good. And he'll still have that opportunity. But mid-course like this, at the flip of a coin, to change what we've spent, I don't know, 5 hours doing here is the wrong thing to do. And it's especially wrong because that's not how anybody else would be treated. I don't know why he should be treated that way. I don't know why anybody should be treated that way. He received a subpoena. He didn't comply. He threw it in our face. He disrespected the Congress. He disrespected this committee, and he disrespected the American people and the rule of law. We have to go through a process.
Would the gentleman yield?
I will in a second. I know he's real special to some people on the other side, but to me, he's just another person who broke the law and has to comply with the law. I really believe this is fundamentally wrong, and I disagree with it. I yield to the gentleman, Mr. Ivey.
Thank you. Just a couple quick
Mr.
points.
Bentz. Time belongs to Mr. Bentz. I think Mr. Bentz is,
Oh, I'm sorry.
but Mr. Bentz wants to yield, that's fine. Okay, gentleman's right.
Thank you. Just a couple quick points. I mean, the point about this is no time to negotiate this. Let me say, the first time I saw the report, I believe, was either late Monday night or Tuesday morning. So, as soon as we got a chance to have it and read through it, we started putting the amendments together. So, I would appreciate the opportunity, actually, if you all want to have a chance to give us a chance to negotiate, read a report. Some committees actually permit minority reports to be written in response, and they're submitted together. That would be wonderful. So, would love to work with you on that front.
Mr. Vance, would you yield back to me? Thank you. This is not the time. It's not the place. He broke the law. He has to be deposed. After he is deposed, he can have his public hearing. There's a reason you want to change the formula here. He has to obey just the way every other American citizen has to. He's not special. He's another guy that broke gun laws, another guy that broke tax laws, and is involved with his father in illegal activity, in my opinion, and that's what we need to find out.
Time for the gentleman that expired, the gentlelady from Texas, and then we'll go to Georgia.
And my good friend from New Jersey has made a very potent point. He's just like every other American. And the time that I've spent on this committee is a little bit longer than some others have. And so I've had my share of subpoenas and those that have not been followed through on. And I would also say that we as lawyers, most of us here, I know there are some who are not lawyers, but I should say members of the Judiciary Committee, have never run away from what is a reasonable solution to an issue that we're addressing. So I take issue with those who would suggest, well, we've been here 5 hours, let's sock it to them. We've been here 5 hours, and if we come away at the end of the 5 hours, and Mr. Chairman, it is your prerogative, but you could have that prerogative along with our ranking member who offered some thoughtful comments, and we came away with a solution, then we're better for it because we could give that same solution to every other American. And I think that what has been offered has been misunderstood. What has been offered is, at least some back and forth, was to have the open hearing in the form of where we would not be subject to the limitations of the 5 minutes. It could be in the form of, to Mr. Nadler's point, each side getting an hour, I'd say 2 hours, but that's 4 hours, and you'd have counsel, and then you'd have counsel, and then you'd have the opportunity for member questioning. And it would be in a public setting. Someone else could come up with the same misfortune of being misunderstood, like Mr. Biden has been misunderstood, because he was willing to appear, and we could discuss a solution for that person.
They're so full of
Like
garbage.
every other American. I think the 14 days is a reasonable time. I didn't hear Mr. Ivey answer that, but he said that 30 days was not a time that he was wedded to. So 14 days, but I don't see why it cannot be resolved in the few hours more that we have here. So I would hope that we're stepping over our message here, our points. He is being treated like every other American. If we have a solution, let's put the solution forward. And we have a disagreement, you're in the majority, and your interpretation is that he is in contempt. You're right, my interpretation is that he is not because he offered to appear. Would the gentlelady yield? I will, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member. And therefore, we have a disagreement, you being the majority, you would prevail, but I don't think we'd get anywhere if we can resolve it. And I think we have an answer. Mr. Nadler, yield.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding. I just want to point out, if we vote this contempt resolution, and presumably the House votes it, it will eventually go to the Department of Justice to enforce it. By then, it'll be a year and a half from now, by the time they get around to it, if they bother doing it. Much better if we don't vote the contempt resolution, recess, and see if we can get an agreement by Mr. Biden to come in and testify under rules in which the majority gets an hour, and then the minority gets an hour,
This smells
and
of
then the majority,
panic.
and then the minority as long as it goes, and questions. And then you'll get the information, as opposed to being frustrated by a contempt proceeding that will take a long time and will get nowhere. So I would suggest that we not do the contempt citation if we really want the information. If we don't want the information, have fun with the contempt citation, but you're not going to get the information. If you want the information, do what I suggested. I yield back to the
And give the opportunity for the counsel, for Mr. Lowell, for Mr. Biden to respond. I have two individuals, Swalwell, but Mr. Ivey also wants time. I'll yield to you and Mr. Ivey. Mr. Swalwell.
Great. I would just say, take yes for an answer. Our side is saying, you want a public deposition? Great. We support that. Knock yourselves out. Hillary Clinton sat for 8+ hours. We're able to do that. But Mr. Van Drew says this is not the time and place to do it. Like, I'm sorry, are you working on healthcare or gun violence or reducing some of the other costs that Americans are worried about? No, you're doing impeachment over in Homeland Security. You're doing this nonsense here, and you just failed to pass your own rule on the floor. So this is what you're doing right now. So just take yes for an answer. So, Mr. Chairman, let's just take a brief recess.
What were you
Call
doing in the
Mr.
two
Biden's
preceding
lawyer,
sessions
see if
of
they're willing to
Congress,
do it,
sir,
and we may
other
have accomplished
than
something this early in 2024.
hanging and banging
Mr.
with
Very briefly, I think the gentlelady, I would accept the 14 days.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I have an
We've
amendment.
just given you a solution, all four of us here.
I have an amendment to the amendment at the desk.
And you wonder why
Amendment?
shit doesn't ever get done and it stays the same.
Amendment to the amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to the committee report for the resolution recommending that the House of Representatives find Robert Hunter
Without
Biden.
objection, the amendment we consider is read. Gentleman is recognized.
The amendment
Reserve
changes.
a point of order.
Point of order, shove it.
Reserve a point of order.
Gentleman from North Carolina is reserved a point of order.
The amendment changes the number of days from 30 to 14. That's the amendment. Yield back.
Oh, that was a good one.
Who seeks recognition?
That's
Mr. Johnson on the amendment. On the amendment to the amendment.
There's a second amendment in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in opposition to the amendment
course.
of the amendment. And I would simply point out to the American people that you can go through the exercise of putting lipstick on a pig.
You said that yesterday,
but
sir.
when it's all said and done, it's still a pig. And what we have here is a situation where we're
No
putting
one.
politics over people. We are endeavoring to hold Hunter Biden in contempt for failing to respond to a subpoena, something that the chair himself has done and created the environment where people feel like it's okay to not appear. I mean, if you do it, then why can't somebody else do it? Rules for you and not for them.
Rules for
And
thee,
rules
not for me.
Thee, when we're talking about Donald Trump. No rules for thee, but rules for everybody else who is Democrat. Rules don't apply to Republicans,
Oh my
including
gosh.
insurrectionists, including those trying to change history around here. During these hearings, during this hearing, people have been restating history, trying to make January 6th into a pleasant day at the park. No, it was a insurrection, a violent attempt to overthrow the lawful results of an election. And
Sir, everybody
this
knows
House Judiciary Committee has no
that has been debunked.
it has no appetite to go into that, but instead you want to elect the guy or re-elect the guy who put into position those who were here attacking us.
Oh, boy.
The one who fermented the insurrection. You want to protect him and get him reelected, and so therefore you're putting people over. You're putting
Yep,
politics over
X-Comer,
people
ZZZ.
by
It's
going
just
after the president of the
nonstop
United States'
garbage.
son. But you're doing that trying to get at the president. So everybody knows what you're trying to do, and they know that you don't really want to work with Democrats to obtain a public hearing for Hunter Biden. You could have done that a long time ago. You could have done that today.
But like I
but
said, I
you
like
don't
to
want
listen to
do
these
that. You will
because
not
this
do
is how I
that.
get my
So,
news.
Let's stop trying to put lipsticks on a pig and call this exactly for what it is. And now I've heard from my scheduler today that she has made reservations for me to leave D.C. tonight at 7:30 on one of the last flights out. And so I thought about it, and I thought, gosh, Republicans have just brought another rule to the floor of the House. It's the 5th rule of
Oh my
this
God, I
session of
just
Congress
noticed
that
that
has
your
failed. This is unprecedented in the course of
picture
American
is
history.
the one of Sal in the
This many rules having failed, and so now what we're looking at, ladies and gentlemen, is having the Speaker of the House return to this committee because he's poised to be ousted, the 3rd Speaker to suffer we're looking at bringing in a third speaker now, if this doesn't work out for my friend, the current speaker, and he'll be coming back to this committee, and he'll be welcome. We know what he's about, and we will, perhaps the next speaker will be selected from this committee as well, or it could be the House Oversight Committee.
Sir, you're going to make me late.
Taking priority over this committee.
You're going to make me late for the
But,
next
yeah,
one.
I'll yield to the gentle lady, but I would
down.
say that let's not put lipstick on this pig. This is
You
a
already
pig.
said that.
This pig is called politics over people, and with that, I'll yield to the gentle lady.
Yeah, and I never want to, in any event, subvert or to be in a different advocacy from my good friend and scholar, Congressman Johnson. I would not say that we're doing the dressing of a pig. I would only say, in a little disagreement of Mr. Johnson, that if we can get a resolution of this, Mr. Chairman, points have been made by Mr. Ivey, myself. They have been made by a good friend from Florida, and Mr. Nadler, and some of your members, that this could be resolved. The question is it going to be resolved? With that, I yield back to the gentleman. And a resolution is on the table of how it could be resolved. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I speak in favor of the amendment to the amendment, although I really don't care, frankly, whether it's 14 days or 30 days. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that we pass the Ivey amendment, because that can resolve everything. So we would be voting for a contempt resolution, inviting Mr. Biden to testify in public under deposition-type rules. If he doesn't agree, then I would agree he ought to be held in contempt. If he does agree and he comes, then I assume the contempt will be voided because he will have appeared before the committee. Nothing lost by doing this. So I support the Ivey amendment in either version. And I yield to the gentleman from Maryland.
I thank the ranking member. Let me say this. First of all, thank you for those who are open, and for the gentleman from Florida.
I'm leaving them at 1.5 times
proposal. I
speed.
would
They're
certainly accept
almost
that amendment.
finished. I don't want to be late
And
for the next
my
one.
colleagues on the other side who are at least willing to have a conversation about it. This might be controversial, but let me say this.
drop
Just
the
to
link
step back and
again.
take an objective position, regardless of who's the majority and who's the minority. These cases, if it goes to court, this is not the best set of facts for the House Judiciary Committee, because we don't have, as we've talked about before, I won't use names because then it gets partisan, but we don't have the best set of facts here. This is not somebody stonewalling and refusing to come under any circumstances. This is not somebody who's asserted a privilege that's been rejected but still refusing to come. This is not somebody who hasn't produced any documents. You've got somebody here who's put an offer on the table to come and testify publicly. So the question in a court would be, in absence of the negotiations and reasonable discussions that Congressman Klein mentioned earlier and some of you other members have mentioned as well, what's the record we would be sending forward at this point? And would a judge look at this and say, or a court of appeals and say, yeah, the House Judiciary Committee really made the effort to negotiate through this with Hunter Biden. He offered to publicly testify. They didn't take him up on it, even though they said that he could do it at one point. I mean, why would we want that set of facts to go forward and put the risk of, if we have the court's rule against us, it actually undermines subpoena authority for this committee and this chamber. So if we can move forward with a reasonable, let's give them 14 days, whatever number you all want to pick, but some additional time after the resolution goes, which increases our chances of actually getting the information that you all are saying you want, as opposed to just moving forward with a resolution that's strictly contempt, criminal contempt. So I just ask, and I thank the gentleman for the...
Reclaiming my time, I just want to point out, I agree with everything that the gentleman from Maryland said, but I just want to point out, if the gentleman's amendment is adopted, we can all vote for the citation that's before us, in the knowledge that we will offer to Hunter Biden, through his attorney, that he can come in and testify under deposition rules publicly. If he says no, then he deserves to be held in contempt at that point. If he says yes, we'll get the information we need from his testimony, and presumably at that point, there would be no necessity for the contempt after that. So I urge the adoption of the Ivey amendment. I don't care whether it's 14 or 30 days. I yield back.
Gentleman yields.
I'll yield to the gentlelady from Texas.
I just want to say this one point, because my colleagues, and thank you, Mr. Nadler, colleagues on the other side very quickly were couching this as special benefits to Mr. Biden. Please, to the American people, this is not special benefits. The language here specifically says may testify at a public hearing on the topics outlined in the committee subpoena. He'll be under oath, and as Mr. Nadler said, he'll either accept or not accept this particular proposal. He'll be under oath, and we may have the ability to formulate the approach, which would be a deposition approach or otherwise, but we will have a solution. My friends on the Judiciary Committee, is there something adverse to this committee ever working together and having a solution on something that is as provocative and controversial as this may be? Should we reject that possibility? And I am rising to support the gentleman's 14 days, because I think that will move this along quickly.
I agree with the gentlelady from Texas, and I yield back.
I yield back.
We can work together.
Oh my
We did that
God,
with
Bobby,
32
that
votes
cat
last
you
month.
said is so funny. I go, Lily.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The problem is, I support the amendment to the amendment, but the amendment doesn't say what we're talking about. The amendment doesn't say we have deposition rules and it's under this and all this. It says public hearing. In case anybody hasn't noticed, and by the way, I've followed a lot of these contempt hearings. I've watched when my colleagues had the majority and weakened the position of the House.
Would the gentleman yield?
In just a second. And I want to walk through all of this for a second. He could cure this before it goes to the floor. We can negotiate all of those different things. But the facts aren't nearly as clear-cut as are being said, because the other parts of the facts that come into a criminal case is holding a press conference on the floor of the House, having the Secret Service sweep the oversight room to basically troll the entire committee. These facts aren't as great for you or for the other side as you want. Unfortunately, I actually agree with Congressman Liu. I have very, very lessening confidence that DOJ will ever prosecute this because I've seen what's happened through all of this. But the whole point is you don't negotiate all of these things at this point. We hold him in contempt, which he more than rightly deserves, and he has the opportunity before this goes to the floor to negotiate with the majority leader or with the chairman and the chairman's staff on how to cure this contempt. Also, he has the right to do that at any point in time because I can tell you if you end up complying with the underlying terms of the subpoena, it's a pretty good defense whether you've been held in contempt by committee
So
or not.
will the gentleman yield now?
Yield it.
Yeah, so would the gentleman then acknowledge that if the amendment as amended, or as it's about to be amended, were adopted, that could increase the likelihood of a DOJ prosecution? Do you think it would increase the likelihood, decrease the likelihood, or have no effect? I yield back.
I think if it's written as is, we're going to get gamed on TV, we're going to get gamed in another press conference, and we're going to get gamed
Would the gentleman yield? Would the gentleman yield?
Sure.
I suggest that we amend the amendment to set out that it should be by deposition rules with an hour for the majority, an hour for the minority, alternating.
I will
and,
reclaim my time.
That would take care of the problem.
I reclaim my time. I think that is a perfect conversation for the chairman and the ranking member to have and make an offer.
Mr. Lowell has our number. We've had conversations with him. Has the council's number, and we will have those conversations.
The process is working the way it's supposed to work, particularly when somebody has thumbed their nose and just completely done that. It's also working the way I think it's supposed to work when I have years of history of the most charitable way I can say it is very favored treatment from law enforcement and the court system as it's existed for. With that, I yield it.
Would the gentleman yield?
The
I
question.
would suggest as follows. There was a time and a place to have this conversation, and it was prior to the date and time that Mr. Biden was ordered to appear for testimony. And that conversation should have occurred between Mr. Biden's attorneys and this committee. It did not. And at this point, he was lawfully ordered to appear for testimony, failed to do so, and I, along with many of the others in this room, have practiced law, been in court, served as a judge, and if we do not enforce our authority to compel testimony, it is not worth the paper that it's written on. Today, we have a witness who has failed to appear, who has flouted the authority of this committee, and indeed had the temerity to conduct a press conference rather than appearing pursuant to that requirement. The only appropriate action for us to take today is to proceed with an ultimate finding of contempt. Any subsequent conversation that we want to have about terms of testimony, how it should be conducted, when, where, all of that can be continued, discussed after we make the appropriate finding of contempt at today's hearing. With that, I yield
Would the gentleman yield?
Yield back to the gentleman from North Dakota.
Gentleman yield. Mr. Chairman, I would ask in a colloquy format, if between the time we find the Biden in contempt and the time it goes to the floor, which is certainly a week or more, would you be willing to accept a revised date in which he would come as subpoenaed and comply with the subpoena?
I said that earlier, that that's the time between when this vote happens and going to the floor, whenever that may be.
So he has the ability to cure it, and we don't need an amendment that talks about a hypothetical one that he has agreed to.
Exactly.
Lastly, from your many years of experience, both on this committee and oversight, if we were to grant every witness who wanted to have a public stage that we subpoenaed, knowing that you have held, as did the Oversight Committee, now and in the previous administrations, you hold almost a deposition every day sometimes, and certainly every week. Would the committee have nearly enough time if everything became a committee public hearing, or would that bring us to our knees?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the gentleman's question. The question occurs on the amendment to the amendment. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Any of the chairs, the noes have it. The question now.
Recorded vote?
Recorded
Yeah,
vote. This is a recorded vote. Has been asked
Okay, I
for
think
on the
this is done.
amendment to the amendment.
Mr. Nagus.
I had 3 minutes.
Not agreed to. Question now occurs on the. Okay, clerk report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 18 ayes and 18 noes.
Amendment is not agreed to. Question now occurs on the amendment from the gentleman from Maryland. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Ask for a recorded vote?
The recorded vote being
Of
requested.
course.
Clerk will call the-
Mr. McClintock votes. Mr. Fitzgerald votes no. Mr. Baxter Moore. Nadler. Ms. McBath. Aye. 14 ayes.
Opposed, no. No. Opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. And
Oh, great.
the amendment nature substitute is adopted. Reporting quorum being present. The question is on favorably reporting the report as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Ranking member request a roll call vote. Oh, the opinion of the chair, yeah, the ayes, that was obvious, the ayes have it. The,
Now I request the roll call.
roll call vote being requested.
Votes aye. Mr. Hunt votes no. Mr. Johnson. No. Ms. Ross.
Haven't recorded their vote. The clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 23 ayes and 14 noes.
The ayes have it, and the report is ordered to be reported to the House. Members will have 2 days to submit views. Without objection, the staff is authorized to make technical and conforming changes. This concludes the committee's business for this meeting, and the meeting is adjourned.
Okay. I think I got tricked again. Oh no, June. No, this one is just now concluding. The link, let me post it one more time. The link I just posted, that's where we're going next. I got 1 minute. So I'm going to cut this and I'll see you over on that other one. Thank you.